Welcome to technical session number 7. Like we were saying earlier, we're going to be jumping around a little bit because we want to kind of line everything up so that we're all talking about the same subjects at the same time. And it's unfortunately not always a straight line. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking about RAM, not to be confused with the George Michael band from the 80s, Wham. No, this is random access memory. So we're going to be getting into a little bit of this. And our main objectives for the duration of this technical session are going to define system memory and describe some of the different technologies involved. We're also going to be able to articulate the process, including key questions to answer. When should I upgrade my RAM? Also, we want to determine how to select and purchase the right memory module. Hint, hint, see the documentation. And summarize the process of installing memory. This will seem eerily familiar to the last 2 technical sessions we did. And then also identify common pitfalls when selecting and installing memory, and talk about these common problems that come up and describe a little bit how to solve them. And some of you may be sitting there in your chairs going, oh man, is there a way we can practice working with this stuff when we're done, where we can go and kind of get our hands in and just kind of work with it a little bit? You're in luck. There are test out labs. So we will have the opportunity to go in and work with this a little bit. All right. For this particular technical session, we want to focus on 2 behavioral skills and mindsets. They are pretty much the same from the one this morning, and that is adaptability and persistence. One, being able to change our perspective based upon current events and what's happening in the technological world around us. And the other, just pure grit can go a long way. Much of success has to do with persistence more than base intelligence. If somebody is really smart but gives up easy, they're not going to succeed. If you're of average intelligence but extremely persistent, you can be immensely successful. So regardless of where you may think you fall in this category, persistence is a key indicator for success. All right. Go back here one page really quick. Call out here. LJ, when I use the term or the word volatile, what does this word make you think of? Volatile. All right. There we go. Let's see here. Looking through. Anita, when you hear the word volatile, what does it make you think of? I told you, I'm drawn to the ones with the cameras on. All right, 2 for 2. Go here, Brandon.
Yeah. Volatile kind of makes me think of a nuclear explosion.
Nuclear
it's
explosion,
extremely volatile.
Extremely volatile. Okay. So like, let's see up there, chaos. Temporary, that's an interesting one. I like that, John. Unstable. Unpredictable. So do you think that'd be like a good moniker to add to like a person? Like you say, that person is a volatile person.
No.
Do we think that'd be a positive thing? No.
It can be.
Can
if you're
be.
playing if you're playing a game and you need someone that not predictable, someone that can think on their hand, that can adapt easily.
Okay, somebody that can just jump in there and just cause massive chaos.
Yeah. It depends on
Okay.
what the goal.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So, in terms of memory, volatile comes up as well. So, one of the key terms that somebody used in here was unstable. So, when we use the term volatile in reference to memory, we're talking about unstable memory. So, this is memory that loses all of its contents when it loses power. When the power is turned off, everything is erased from it. So, this is volatile memory. And in direct contrast to that, we have non-volatile memory, which we could use the antonym for unstable and just call it stable. So this is stable memory, and it retains its contents even when the power is turned off. So for non-volatile memory, where do we think we would want to utilize this with regards to computers? Where would we want to put non-volatile memory?
Drive.
Non-volatile
Okay,
goes in the hard drive.
hard drive, right? So we're going to be storing things like our operating system, documents, stuff like that. So various hard drives, that would be a good place for non-volatile memory. Anybody want to take a guess when we would want to utilize volatile memory? Just a guess. It doesn't have to be specific.
RAM.
So RAM. And what would we use it for? So what would be a purpose of the volatile memory? Just a guess.
For data you need quickly.
Data you need quickly.
Transfer rates.
Transfer rates, maybe run apps temporarily, hold on to something while I'm processing something else I may need it in a minute.
Something that's able to quickly delete data, so you have more data to put in there.
Okay. My user likes to have 97 web windows open. I have to hold all of those for them just in case they might need it in the next, 6 days. So volatile memory, short term, loses its contents when it's turned off. Unbuffered, just basic definitions. This is dealing directly with the chipset controller. Buffered is much like when you're watching a video and you always see that little gray bar load up before you start to play, where it's loading up some of the video before you start watching it. It's creating a buffer, a little bit of a, built-in gap. So what it's trying to do is estimate based on how you're downloading, how much extra it needs to download so that you can watch the video continually without stopping. Same thing kind of works with RAM. It helps the chipset handle large electrical loads in the system, if the system is utilizing a lot of memory. Then we have single-sided and double-sided RAM, which basically means chips on either one side of the silicon wafer or both sides of the silicon wafer. It's pretty straightforward with regards to that. Those are just some basic terms we're going to use while we move forward. So the term memory with regards to computer. Remember, we were trying to distinguish between memory and storage, right? So memory is an area within your computer where the information is stored while it's being worked on. So your processor may be super powerful, but it may not have the ability to hold on to all of the information it needs to generate the website or the game or whatever it is that you're wanting to utilize at that time. So it has to have somebody kind of hold on to that stuff for them while they're making the calculations and basically, translating the data into a usable form for us. All this data, like we talked about last week, is stored using on or off switches, which is basically a 1 or a 0. What's the other term we use for this?
Binary.
Binary. And what do we call these ones and zeros?
On and offs.
Well, they're on and offs, yes, but what's the other term we use for them?
Bytes.
Byte.
Bytes.
Well,
Beats.
bits.
Binary
There we go.
codes.
Bits.
Bits.
Bits. What is a byte?
8.
8 bits.
8 bits. 8 bits. Excellent. And you're correct, Motashara. It is a base 2 system. All right. How many are in a nibble?
4-bit.
4.
4. Yeah, 4 bits in a nibble. Very good. And when we string all of this stuff together, these switches can essentially represent large numbers, codes, everything that we're seeing on the computer, all the programs we interact with, all the sounds we hear, the images we see, all of that is broken down into ones and zeros. And so some of the stuff that we do can require a lot of memory, and some of it doesn't require so much. So we'll put a pin in RAM, which is the random access memory, and we're talking about that real quick, and step over to ROM, or read-only memory. And historically speaking, this was non-volatile memory and permanent. And you were not able to change any of the data or instructions or any of that stuff on the chips unless you replaced the chips. This was typically where we would have our BIOS, our post routine, boot instructions. Historically speaking, this is where we would keep all of this stuff. Well, times they are changing. So we need the ability to update these things because information is changing and technology is changing much faster. And we want to have the ability, if we create a BIOS or a UEFI for our system, and then an exploit is discovered where they can bypass our security, we want to be able to fix this, right? So we have to have the ability to read over it. So the types of ROM chips that you would interact with, they have the PROM, or programmable read-only memory. And then we get into the erasables. So programmable usually would be programmed once and you're good. And then you have the erasable programmable read-only memory, or EEPROM. And this would allow you to erase that memory and then rewrite it. And it used a form of UV light to actually erase the chip. Cool, but impractical, right? Who wants to go in there and just like wave the little UV wand over the ROM chip every time they want to redo the memory? So not very practical. It works essentially in manufacturing. That's about all you needed it for. And then they finally got to the electrically erasable programmable read-only memory, or EEPROM. And this allows us to do it from the system, to send an electrical signal to erase it. And this is when we would do something like flash the BIOS, or we would do an update on our BIOS systems or our UEFIs. Does anybody remember what happens if this gets interrupted?
Your
What do you do?
PC's bricked.
Expensive paperweight.
There you go. PC is bricked. It becomes an expensive paperweight. Anybody ever had this happen?
Luckily,
Thank
no.
God. Thank God I haven't.
I had it happen to a gaming console.
Oh no.
RIP. You know, and unfortunately it was one where it was a known issue, but when it happened to me, it was past the date when they would correct it. And I was like, oh, okay, wonderful. So, you know, it's now on the monument of sadness. No longer functions. So this is our read-only memory, again, typically used in our post routine, our BIOS programs, boot instructions, stuff like that. Now, RAM, or random access memory. We have a few different flavors of that throughout time. You have the dynamic RAM, which, you know, most of these are older until we get down to the bottom, the CMOS and the synchronous. So you had the dynamic RAM, which stored data for only a fraction of a second before it was erased, so it continually erased. To maintain any of the data, you must constantly refresh the RAM. So that took a little more time and effort to maintain these things. So this reduced the capabilities of the RAM we were using. And the DRAM packages came in SIMs, or single inline memory modules, or DIMMs, which stands for dual inline memory module. And you will still see DIMMs pop up today. SIMs are a little more rare. Beyond that, we got into static RAM. This retained information without the need for refreshing as long as power was maintained. As long as it had a trickle of power, it could maintain all the information that was on the memory module, which led us into CMOS RAM. And CMOS RAM maintains a trickle of power. How?
By storing it with the battery?
There you go. That little trickle of power comes in through that little watch battery, the CMOS battery. Those go bad about every 3 years. Thankfully, they're insanely cheap. As a technician, if you're working on site, it's good to have about 10 or 12 of them just in your bag. And then finally, we get to synchronous RAM, or synchronous DRAM, excuse me, SDRAM. And this is designed to operate at the clock speed of your computer. What sets the clock speed? Do we remember?
CPU.
The BIOS?
BIOS,
How's it maintained? What keeps the clock?
CMOS.
the CMOS battery.
CMOS.
What keeps the clock on your watch?
The quartz thing.
How about that
Yeah,
quartz
the quartz
oscillator?
crystal.
Oh,
It's
Whatever it is.
quartz something. I don't remember the last.
So your
crystal clock.
processor and your laptop, or excuse me, your processor and your motherboard are going to be able to operate within a range, but the clock speed is generally going to be determined by that quartz crystal. So it can operate at this frequency, and one of the easiest ways to kind of understand how the RAM is working with regards to the different generations is to almost think of it like music notes. Anybody here play musical instruments? Or are able to read music or any of that stuff? Nobody? Way back, Jose. Okay. You still have a basic understanding, though, of whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, 16th notes, all that stuff. Generationally speaking, yes. Motor, So SDRAM, synchronous dynamic RAM. This is used in almost all of our modern systems. Holds the instructions while the CPU is kind of working on that stuff. And the North Bridge, also known as the memory controller chip, kind of operates like a traffic cop and shuffles the information back and forth that needs to go and determines what has priority, what doesn't. And all of this is tied to the system clock. And so long as we can operate at the same pace of the clock, no buffering is needed because we can speak at the same speed and language. And then we can actually do some interesting things within the clock. So RAM modules come in a variety of what they call form factors. Remember, we heard this term when we were talking about motherboards, form factors. All this really is just a fancy way of saying size and shape. So whenever you hear the term form factor, they just mean size and shape. So the three main ones that we want to keep in mind is we have our DIMMs, which is our dual inline memory modules. Those go in your standard PCs, desktops, towers, what have you. And then you have your SODIMM, which the SO stands for small outline. And this goes into your all-in-ones, laptops, notebooks, netbooks, things like that. And then when you start getting down into tablets, you generally are operating with what are called micro DIMMs, which you have right over here. All right. A second, sorry. All right. So we had our SODIMMs. They operated at the top of the clock. So every time the clock ticked, it would send a pulse. Well, we can't make the system clock move faster, right? So the system clock's almost like our metronome. So it kind of clicks along. But we can operate within the bounds of the clock. So we have a peak and a trough on every clock. And for SODIMMs, they're operating just at the peaks. Well, they find a way to double our data rate. So DDR, so double data rate. So DDR, synchronous dynamic RAM. And so now what they're doing is they're hitting at the top of the clock and at the bottom of the clock. So now we're at half notes, right? So it's like boom, 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 boom. So synchronous whole notes, just hitting at the top of the clock. Double data rate, we're doubling our speed, hitting at the top and the bottom of the clock. Now, how we would calculate that, we have our clock speed down here. And then we're going to multiply it by 2 to hit our double data rate speed because we're doubling it, right? We will get into that, Kaylee. So we will get into overclocking, and that's more of an issue within the CPU working within the clocking of the clock, or working within the clock. All right, so we double our data rate. So if we had 100 megahertz, just to keep it easy, we double it, we get to 200. And then if we want to know what our PC speed ratings are, we have to multiply it by 8 because that gets us our, the number of bytes. So PC rating, you multiply your final speed by 8, and that's how you get it. So single rate 100, double data rate 200 times 8 clocks us at 1600. This makes sense. The only oddball thing is at the end, we have to multiply it by 8. Right? We always do that to get our PC speed rating. Give me a thumbs up. Good. No. All right. So, simple math, yes. Next, take it up a notch. Next generation. So DDR2, we'll get to that. Let's put a pin in there for a second. Sorry, they threw this one in here in the middle. After DDR, they started utilizing what's called dual channel technology. We talked about this a little bit yesterday or the day before. And this is essentially allowing 2 sticks of RAM to operate as a single unit to increase your throughput or efficiency. All of this will depend on your motherboard. Some motherboards are allow single channel or only allow single channel. These are older ones. More modern ones will allow double, triple, and sometimes quad channel, depending on the unit you're using. Now, in each channel, so you see here where we have orange, yellow, or red, black, we have to put them in the same colors typically. If they're all the same color, like if you have a gaming board and it's, you want it to be like purple or black or red or blue or green or whatever, so all of them would be the same color. You would need to read the documentation to see which one you would need to use. But a lot of them will color code them nicely like this. So we know if we're going to be putting a RAM module in, we need to put one in bank 1 and then one in bank 3 because we're going to put them in the 2 orange slots, and those 2 will work together. And then we have the 2 yellow slots, and those 2 will work together. They have to be the same type of RAM. So they have to have the same PC speed rating and latency. Otherwise, they will not work together because they're going to be talking at different speeds. So they have to be identical to be able to function together.
So on
Zach.
that one, wasn't
Go
it
ahead.
back then that if the slower RAM would pretty much take precedent over the speed?
The what?
In situations you have like a mismatch on speed RAM.
If you have a mismatch, it may not work at all, but the lower speed would take precedent because you can't increase the speed of the lower one, but you can dumb down the higher, right?
Yeah. Okay.
To my understanding, that's the way it works. So in order for them to speak at the same speed, they would have to slow down. So that's our dual channel memory. Now, next generation up, DDR2. This one is faster than DDR1, utilizing less power. Let me go back here really quick. Please take a screenshot of this for the pins. You do need to know these pin counts. So your DIMM or your standard has 184 pins. Your SODIMM has 200 pins. Your microDIMM has 172. This is information you need to know. Give about another 30 seconds to grab screenshots. And here we go. All right. DDR2. It doubles the clock again. So that's why we're double data rate times 2. So the first DDR, we doubled the rate from 100 to 200. For DDR2, we're doubling from 200 then to 400. So we're doubling it yet again. And then we multiply it by 8 at the end to get our PC speed rating. Instead of 1600, we now have 3200. So all we've done is double the data rate one more time. And so instead of half notes, we're now using quarter notes. And then pin counts, you have a 240 for your DIMMs, and your SODIMMs have a 200 pin connector.
Micro-DIMMs don't use DDR2.
I believe the microDIMMs have the same pin out as SODIMM on this one. I'll have to double check, but I believe so. All right, any questions on this? All right, well, let's double it again. DDR3, we're now up to 8th notes. So now from our 100, we double it, we get 200, we double it again up to DDR2, we get 400, double it again up to DDR3, we're now up to 800. Multiply that by 8 at the end, and we now get 6400 speed rating. So we're starting to see that it's exponential growth. Each generation doubling in its capacities. And then we have a 240 DDR. SODIMM is 204. And I believe microDIMM is also 204 on this one. And each generation also is consuming less and less power. So we're able to do more with less input. But in general, just try to keep in mind from a tech perspective, the higher the PC rating you see, the faster the RAM is operating. Right? Any questions so far?
Can you please repeat the triple channel and quad channel?
Sure. Are you talking about for the dual channel? Like
Yes.
this, or are you talking about DDR3 and DDR4?
Yeah.
Okay, so for dual channel, it essentially means that you're going to have two banks. So I would have two RAM units. So if I put one in each of these red banks, those two units, if I dual channel turned on my motherboard, those two units would operate as if they were a single unit, being able to work more efficiently and increase their throughput. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if I had triple channel, typically it wouldn't be a 4-bank motherboard, it would be a 6-bank. So they would have the capability of putting 6 RAM modules in there. Triple channel would use 3 memory modules together as a single unit. And then quad channel would use 4 RAM sticks as a single unit.
Do you mind me asking a question that we went through, that we had to answer before? The 1 through 5 question for the homework?
Can we do that after the lesson?
Yeah.
Or is this within the lesson?
It's within it, I believe. It was
right.
it was asking what type of memory chip would you need for a PC3 16,000. So
Okay,
I'm
so
wondering if that's like a
So we would have to work
DDR3?
backwards, right? We would have to divide it by 8 and work backwards. And then like cut it in half, cut it in half, cut it in half until we met one of the RAM module SODIMM ratings that we were starting with. Right?
Mhm. Okay.
So we know we can get there by doubling it the number of times that we have the DDRs, and then we multiply it by 8. And then to go backwards, we divide by 8 and then half it until we get back to where we need to be. It's somewhere along the lines of Moore's law, Justin. All right, did I answer the question with regards to the dual, triple, and quad channel?
Yes, thank you.
Not a problem. All right, so DDR4, second verse, same as the first. We're just doubling it one more time. So that's all we're doing. And then our pinout is 288 for this. And then right around this time, the DDR5 came out shortly after this. And again, we're doubling it one more time. That's all we're really doing. So it's like each time you're just doubling it more. And then in the end, multiply it by 8 to get your PC speed rating. All right. So earlier this morning, we talked about expansion cards and how they had the slot that moved to different locations based upon the voltage. So we didn't inadvertently put the wrong type expansion card in our motherboard and potentially fry the card. They do the same thing for RAM. As you can see, each generation moves the notch a little bit so that I can't put a DDR RAM module in a motherboard that requires DDR3. So they're going to be in different locations. And so they won't be able to fit or lock in. They'll just kind of rock back and forth. So it's just kind of a way to try to foolproof it so that we don't try to inadvertently install a module.
Kelly,
wrong.
can you go back to the, just so I get clarification? So if I'm looking at the, I'm inside the computer and I want to add memory to the slots, I would be putting a DDR2 in a red slot and then another DDR2 in the second red slot?
Yes, but they would need to be the same PC speed rating and latency. So they would need to be identical types of RAM.
Okay.
So yes, you are correct.
Okay, thank you.
So they need to be identical capacity and everything. So across the board, they need to be the same.
Right, okay.
So we know about the PC speed rating now, which the higher that number is, the better off we're doing. So now we need to talk about latency, which latency is just a fancy word for delay. Anybody ever been watching the news and you get the on the ground reporter and they ask the reporter a question and it seems like it takes them like a minute to process what has just been said before they start talking? Yeah, that's all due to latency or delay, because typically they're operating off of satellite. So what happens is the signal has to go all the way up to space and all the way back down, and that generally takes a couple seconds to transfer the data. And so from our perspective, as we're communicating, it appears like there is a delay. Well, delay can come in all different places. RAM is another one. And so on your RAM modules, they'll give you your PC speed rating, which right here would be your PC speed rating, this is 2133. And then they will give you a latency number, and they refer to it in one of two different ways. So they will either talk about it as column address strobe, or CAS, or CL for clock cycles. And PC speed rating, we want the highest number possible, right? But for delay, we want the lowest number possible. You know, we don't want to go for more delay. So think of that number as basically the you know, it's not exactly it, but the amount of time it's going to be delayed. So the higher that number, the more delay you'll have before the memory module can respond. The lower, the faster it reacts. And trust me when I tell you, the lower that number gets, the price of that RAM module is going to go up proportionally. So you get that number really low, it's going to get really expensive. And, you know, if you're doing things like online gaming, if you're doing things like live trading, things like that, where milliseconds matter, then you're going to be shopping for something with lower latency. If you're just doing documents and email and casual web surfing, latency is not really going to matter, just so long as the system doesn't freeze up. So understanding your customer or yourself will let you know what you can recommend with regards to RAM modules. Because unfortunately, the general rule is when somebody asks you, how much RAM should I have? You know, the answer is generally as much as you can get. You know, as much as you can afford, as much as you can get. Beyond that, shop within your means and determine what is the most, you know, the best fit for what you need to do. What do you mean, Mudasir?
Oh no, it looked same like in terms of the shape, but I look close. It looks there's a slight difference.
Yeah, there is a slight difference. They're off by like a millimeter or something. And then DD4 is also slightly off. These three are like slightly off from each other. But yeah, we will get it. We'll get into that. So knowing what we know now about latency, Kelly, can you please tell me which of these two modules would be faster? The upper or the lower? You there? All right.
First, I thought you were asking yourself.
I'm like, yeah, I keep saying every time I call on Kelly, I'm like, I feel like I'm Deion Sanders talking to myself in third person. All right.
The CL6.
Takia, can you tell me which of these would be faster? Upper or the lower? Which one would be faster?
Hello, what's the question?
I'm trying to see which of these memory modules would operate faster? Any, Takia? All right.
Did you happen to say which one had the lower latency?
I was asking which one of these would be faster. Which do you think, Joseph?
My answer is whichever one has the lower latency.
Okay, which one of these has the lower latency?
That's what I don't know.
The upper one.
The upper
The
one.
CL number.
And the
This
upper
is
one.
CL6, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So CL6. Yeah, that's the lower. It's the lower number. It's going to be the faster RAM module. The one CL9, it's going to be the higher number, and that's going to be the slower one. It's going to have more delay.
So the CL directly refers to the, okay, I see.
CL, yeah, or clock cycles directly. So if you see a CAS or a CL right here, that's going to tell you which one is the lower latency.
And is the PAS, does that also register as a lower number?
Yes, same. So this is just the two different ways that they will qualify latency on a RAM module. So either via CL number or a CAS number. Both those mean the same thing. Depending on the manufacturer, they will use one or the other. But for our purposes, they mean the same thing. The lower that number, the lower the delay or latency.
So it's written on the DDR. So if it's not written, so where else we can find this number?
If it's not written on the DDR, it would be in the manufacturer's documentation, right? Or if it's installed, we could probably look it up in our system preferences or system settings.
Okay.
All right. All right, so that is latency. Oh, we get to talk about fun stuff now. All right, so we've talked about delay. We've talked about PC speed rating. Yeah, I did call on you, Takia. I didn't know if you were there or not. So we need to talk about parity. And what exactly is this? Parity is essentially a way for us to determine whether or not the information we receive is good or not. I'm going to create a little box here. So to simplify this, let's talk about we're going to use a nibble. So 4 bits of information, right? 4 ones or zeros. And let's say we're sending packets to the memory controller in 4-bit chunks. We want to make sure that the information we're sending is the information that's getting received, right? To make sure it isn't being changed in transit, disrupted, what have you. So the easiest way to kind of think of the parity bit as odd or even. The parity bit is trying to make it even. So if I send a pieces of information, boom, like 1 0 1 1, the parity bit needs to make this even. So I have 3 bits, right? 1 2 3. My parity bit needs to be a 1, which would turn that into an even number, 4. Does that make sense? Yes, no? So the parity bit.
So with the, that's the ASCII code. Wouldn't
What's
it change? The parity byte is added, but does that not change the
Well, the parity bit is sent as kind of like a checksum.
Okay,
So all it's doing is verifying that this is an odd or even number.
So is the parity number always has to be an even number?
So the bit at the end makes it even. So if I receive 1001, this wouldn't be a 1, would it?
No.
Because it's already
No.
even.
it'll be even. Yeah.
So I would get a 0. So it's because it's already even, right? I don't need to change anything. It's already there. Even number, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So if I receive zero, 0, 0, 1. Jamal, what would my parity bit be?
1.
I'm not sure.
Take a guess. You got a 50-50 shot.
0.
0. Not quite, because a 0 would make it still odd, right? Because we
Okay.
only have 1 here, correct?
Okay, cool. So you would put the 1, so your total would be 2, which would be even.
There you go. That's the
Gotcha.
whole purpose of the parity bit, is to make it even. And all this is doing is just verifying that the information that was sent was what I received. So if I get sent 0001 and I have a parity bit of 0, what does that tell me?
Information you received is wrong.
The information that I received is incorrect. So I have 4 bits that came across. It's supposed to be, the 4 bits should make an even number, and they don't. So my information is wrong. This is what parity is checking. So in the case of this, what it's going to do is it's going to drop that packet, basically going to exit out, and then say resend it. So it's going to make the request to resend that information so that it can get the correct information. Okay.
Kelly, could you do one more of those like equations?
Kelly,
Yeah, absolutely.
When we did the binary calculator exercise, how does the parity bit work in that process?
It would work the same. It's odd or even, but it would be an additional bit. So instead of 8 bits, you would have a 9th bit that would be a parity bit. And it would verify whether that string should be an odd or even number. Right? So, does that make sense, Kevin?
I'm gonna make it make sense. Yeah. So
Don't try to think of it in terms of what we just did with that. Just think of it
Right.
just in terms of this for right now,
right.
because we're going to build upon this concept as we go.
Okay, got it.
So how is this now even?
No.
Is it?
No, it's not
No.
even.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that? What does it mean? What does it mean?
Invalid. It's invalid.
It's invalid.
It has to be even, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Okay, my
So
bad. That's all. Okay, cool. My
you're
bad.
you're absolutely correct. So the information is invalid. The system is going to drop that packet and say resend, and then they resend it to you again, and you get the information, and it's 1110. Does it work now?
Yeah, 4 is even.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it starting to make a scary sort of sense?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
I don't get it.
I guess
I
my
don't get it.
clarification is
Can I try
the
to explain
one-
it?
Yes, somebody wants to try to explain it? Yeah, because I may not be putting it in the right words.
So basically, you got to think about it like this: if all four of those ones at like four, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 4, right? That's an even number. If you take away one of those ones and it goes to 3, like if you have a 1 1 0 0 1, right? All of that combined is a 3. So you want to make sure that all the ones added up, or at least this is how I understand it, make the number in total even.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a corrector or a checker.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Q?
No,
Yeah,
I
I just
understand that concept.
yeah, I just
I
don't
guess
get
my
what
thing is
because I was using a
the
bar.
digit thing.
So erase. Let me move the parity bit down here just to make it a little bit easier. It's not the data. All right, so if I have
I apologize. This is in the RAM.
yes, this is happening inside the RAM.
So this is the ECC, is the coding in the RAM.
This is not ECC. We haven't even gotten there yet.
Okay.
We are strictly talking about
The
parity.
parity.
Which is
That's in the RAM.
yeah.
Okay. So that's in the RAM. Okay.
Yeah, so this parity happens in a couple different places, but this is the way we're talking about it now is happening inside the RAM. So Q.
Okay.
What do I have here? Do I have an odd or even number?
Even.
Even. So I got a 1 and a 1. That makes 2, right? So I'm even. Right? So in order to make that even, what would I need to put in here? A 1 or a 0?
0.
0.
Nothing.
Or not?
Does that make sense, Q?
Yeah, it does.
So I don't need to put anything in here to make it even. It's already even, right?
Yeah.
So I put a 0. Now, if I change it up a little bit, do this. What do I got, Q? Odd or even?
Odd.
All right, so what do I need to do here to make it even? Be a 1. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's say I receive this bit and I have a 0 in here. Does that make sense?
No.
No. So
then
that
it
means
still be
that,
odd.
yeah. So that means the data I received is bad. So it has to drop that data and ask the system to resend it.
So my question is that last bit that comes in, is that's the way it comes in when it gets sent?
Yeah.
So
all that
nothing
is a
changes, right?
checksum. It is not part of the program. It is
Okay.
just a checksum. It's just verifying whether or not you received good info.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking it was changed on the fly. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Well, this
it
is
was adding an
parity.
extra bit
This
to
is
it.
parity. We haven't gotten there yet. So this is just parity. That's all we're using it for. Is just verifying
that's
or
the-
not verifying the information is good.
Okay,
This
so all
is
it
like,
does is
yeah, this is just checking. It's a
request that
low
again.
level check.
Yeah. Okay, I see. I understand it now.
So
Would
it's just
there
a low
be
level
a
check if the data is
yeah.
good.
would there be a lab on this?
On this particular thing, no. But we do need to understand it to go into things like RAID and a couple other things. So that's basic parity. Do we understand basic parity? Just real quick.
Pretty much, you just want to see even numbers come in. when
Yeah.
you
So you
add
just
up
want the parity
total.
bit to make everything even, and that's it. And if it doesn't mash out that way, then we drop it and we ask it to be resent.
Okay.
So that's what parity does.
Gotcha.
Now we're going to take it up a level. And we're going to use what's called ECC, or error correcting code. And this is a specific type of RAM. And this is partially what Jose was getting at. And so say I get a nibble of information and I have a 1 in parity, but it dropped a bit in transit, like a bit got missed. It just got dropped. So I have a missing component and I have a parity bit. What does this tell me?
It tells you that the
one is even.
information you received was odd and made even by parity.
Okay, so what is that? What does that tell me about the missing bit?
That it's a 1.
It's a 1, right?
Right.
So through the use of parity, we can go backwards and correct missing data. So this is what error correcting code does. So if a bit gets dropped in transit, this happens all the time. It has the ability on the fly to say, okay, I have a parity bit here. I know what goes here because it's supposed to be odd or even. So based upon the odd or even, I know what's missing. So it's just working that problem backwards. Okay. India, can you possibly tell me what's missing?
It's missing a 1.
All right, how do we know this?
Because you said it's supposed to be even, and a 0 there would make it odd.
That is a perfect explanation. So we know that it's supposed to be even. The numbers we had, it was 0, 0, 1, which was an odd number. We knew that missing bit had to be a 1. So ECC can do this on the fly. This is a specific type of RAM. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Excellent. So this process is going to be a lot more complicated. We're going to be talking about hundreds of bits versus just 4. I wanted to simplify it just so it would make sense.
Yes, I understand.
So excellent. So typically we would not use this in a standard computer. You know, we wouldn't use this in our home PC or office PC or anything like that, because this capability actually significantly slows down the RAM. So this is typically only used in servers where data integrity is much more important. So it's much more expensive. It operates slower, but it maintains data integrity. So places where we would keep financial records, research and development, servers and stuff where we would maintain a lot of this stuff, and data, the data integrity is extremely important, or that the data has to be accurate. That is where we would use ECC RAM. Yes, Emilio.
So I had a question in regards to like the parity bit. Like I understand that in this instance, we're looking at it to be even, but can we also be looking at it to just be odd in some instances if you use like a different like parity scheme?
Well, if it'd be odd, so if I have a 1 here, I would look for these 4 bits to be odd, right?
Yeah.
So what all the parity bit doing is just it's making the whole scenario even, so that everybody operates off of that premise, so it's easy to know what's missing or if something's incorrect, right?
All right. I'm going to check.
Okay. And I think Jose dropped a little bit of information in the chat as well that might clear it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'll try to summarize as best I could. Make it a little bit easier to read. I think I got it right.
Appreciate it. If I explain something a different way and I make it worse, tell me. It has happened before. All right. So go.
I think it helps you view it as a math problem. It's
what?
kind of like that.
What was that explanation again?
No, I said I think it kind of helps you view it as a math problem where you got to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, it's just it's like
think about it like that.
Yeah, a basic algebra or whatever, math problem. Yes. Who's the? I heard.
Me, really quick. Did you say
yes.
parity both parity and ECC are used in servers, or just EC with
ECC specifically. Parity can be a checksum use, just like, hey, I need you to resend it. Hey, I need you to resend it. Hey, I need you to resend it. It's just an error, detecting mechanism.
Yeah.
ECC is an error correcting mechanism, but only used in servers.
Okay.
So ECC is typically only in servers. All right. So registered or buffered memory. And this is essentially a memory that has a register between the memory and the controller, essentially. It stores bits of information, creating essentially a buffer in such a way that the systems can read out all the bits at the same time, kind of making it a little bit easier to work with. And it reduces the load on the memory controller itself. And so it can handle much more than it could in another case. So it's kind of taking some of the load off of the memory controller or the North Bridge and, allowing it so that it can, and handing it the information in such a way that it can manage it all at the same time. Again, registered and buffered memory, also used in servers. It tends to be a little bit more expensive. And the very act of buffering creates a delay or latency. So kind of like when you're loading up a video on your phone. Remember, you see like the little gray bars start to move before the video starts to play. It's the same thing. So it's creating a little bit of a delay to the start of your video so that it can create a buffer. So hopefully by the time you get to the end, the whole video is loaded. And you don't have to stop and see the snake chasing its tail, loading, waiting for your video to finish playing. All right. Access speed. So this is measured in nanoseconds, and this is essentially the amount of time it takes for the RAM to provide the requested data to the memory controller. And then if you're adding memory to a system, ensure that it is at the same speed or faster than existing memory. If it's in the same channel or memory bank, try to make sure it's identical. And you don't mix and match modules in the same banks. And then to understand what your motherboard can handle, double check the specifications for your motherboard. Mileage may vary. All right. SPD. I know you guys are loving these acronyms, and we promise we will keep the acronyms coming. So SPD, this is a tiny little chip that serves one purpose. The only purpose it serves is to basically tell the BIOS or the computer what they are, what their speed is, what their capabilities are. All that is essentially just identifying itself to the BIOS. So when you plug it in, it knows what it's working with. And it's just this tiny little chip. And if you go back and we can look at this other memory module right here, find it. It's right here. SPD is right there. On this one, it's right here on this one. So it's just this tiny little chip that announces who it is and what it can do.
Smaller than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, it's pretty small. So that's it. Serial presence detect. I would write that down. That will come up again. Did you ever TPM this morning?
I did not.
Okay, we'll go over that one again later.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Any questions so far? Anybody need a brain break? Good. Couple yeses. Let's go a couple more slides and then we'll take about 10, 15 minutes. All right, so actually, no, never mind. Let's go ahead and pause here for a second because this is a good breaking point.
Do you mind?
Here a little bit. When do we want to upgrade our RAM? You know, a better idea of what it is, a couple different varieties of it, a little bit on how it works from a high level. But some main things that we are looking for is general system slowness, so things getting much slower. This could be a symptom of RAM. It can also be a symptom of a virus, or just general old computer. We might be getting errors where it says insufficient memory to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So that may be, you know, another one we may come across. And the other one may be excessive drive access, also known as thrashing the hard drive. So when you run out of memory in your RAM, your computer switches to something called virtual memory. And so it's one of these, you absolutely can upgrade memory in a MacBook. It's one of these things where they try to use something else in a manner in which it wasn't originally intended. So what the computer will try to do when your RAM is full is try to use your hard drive like a RAM module. So it's going to start reading and writing to your hard drive really quickly. And if you have a mechanical drive, you can absolutely hear this. It's going like as it's reading and writing really quickly, trying to operate like RAM. And they do this in a section of your hard drive called either the page file or the swap file. You absolutely want to remember that. And this is where the virtual memory is stored. And there's a general equation you use, which is 1.5 times the amount of RAM you have installed. You want to have that set aside in page or swap file. Most systems nowadays do this automatically. So essentially, virtual memory using your hard drive as RAM. And there used to be an old joke, like, you know, IT people would play on people's like, yeah, you could probably download some more RAM if you need it. Knowing that, you know, obviously you can't download more hard drive space, can you?
Wait, you can't do that?
Can't download more RAM?
No.
Here's the
I
funny
remember
thing, you
those
actually
ads back in the day.
can nowadays.
Yeah, you can with your phone. I see that. You can change it. You can let it. I
Well,
see it with most phone now.
so there's a workaround. So we can't download more RAM, right? But can we download more storage? Or can we utilize more storage than what's on our phone?
That's cloud servers, correct?
Cloud servers, right? So if you have a fast internet connection, you can actually utilize cloud storage as part of your virtual memory. It's extremely inefficient, but in essence, you can now download more RAM. It's a weird workaround. I wouldn't recommend it, but somebody actually took the time to figure this out. But for the purposes of the exam, no, you can't download more memory. Yes, the prophecy has been fulfilled. So virtual memory is your hard drive operating like a RAM module to try to buy some time. If you're doing this a lot, it's going to slow your system performance down and basically an indicator that you need more RAM. So what are we considering when we're upgrading or replacing our RAM modules? How much do I need? Well, that question is always essentially as much as I can get, depending on how much money you want to spend. And then the other one is unfortunately, how much is allowed by the operating system? It also could be limited by your architecture of your CPU. If your CPU utilizes what's called 32-bit architecture, it can only hold a maximum of 4 gigs of RAM. That's it. Anything additional you put in on top of that, it won't even recognize it. It'll just recognize 4. So it's wasted.
So your computers have a capacity
Yes. Now, more modern computers, like in more modern operating systems, it's unlikely you will reach that capacity because we're getting in the over 1 terabyte of RAM capacities for newer operating systems. And typically don't have that many RAM modules that we want to install. So typically 16 is pretty good for most, 32 for higher end. Sometimes you can go on that. Yes, absolutely. Your operating system can limit the amount of RAM you can utilize. How many and what kind of modules can I fit on my motherboard? Do I have, 2 RAM slots? Older motherboards may have this. Do I have 4, 6, 8? How many RAM slots? What generation RAM do I need? DDR4, DDR3, DDR2? What form factor of RAM? Am I utilizing standard SODIMMs? Or am I utilizing microDIMMs or SODIMMs? What am I using? And then another thing to look at is how do I install it? If you have a iMac or an all-in-one, that's probably the easiest RAM install ever. You literally just lay it face down and there's a little button on the back that you push and it pops open a hatch. And when the hatch pops open, your RAM modules are right there and you can just add them in if you want. Towers may be a little bit different. There may be a process. You got to open it up. You got to get some things out of the way in order to be able to get to the RAM. So how is this going to be installed? Laptops, some of them are really easy. They may have just one screw to open a hatch. Others, you may have to open up the whole back of it to get to the RAM. So these are things you're going to want to look into before you purchase. See if it's something you want to undertake. See if it's something that's even possible. Most laptops only have 2 slots. Most desktops typically have 4, but can have, again, 6 or 8. So OS limits, Windows 7 and 8, they need at least 2. More is better. Like we said, if it's a 32-bit architecture, maximum of 4. I have an old iMac, which is really weird. It has a maximum of 3. It has 2 slots, maximum of 3. So I'd have to put a 2 gig in one and a 1 gig in the other. It's really weird. Windows 8 64-bit can hold up to 128 gigs. That's a lot. On the iMacs, Jose, they're soldered in.
Oh yeah, like the last MacBook I bought was the MacBook Air, and you really can't do any upgrades to it. It's pretty much solder.
So on the Airs
in there. Well, I see them. All of their laptops are like that now.
Yeah, I heard the same thing for Pro. That's why I asked.
Yeah. When you buy, you pretty much have to buy with the RAM that you want. If not, you're screwed.
They don't like, because they want to be able to get more on the front end. They don't want they want to charge
even,
you $1,000 for 32 gigs more RAM when you can get it for $60.
Yeah. Well, even Windows laptops are doing it too. I know my current laptop, it's just the RAM, you can't even upgrade it. It's like that.
Planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
Got to make it so that you got to cycle those computers faster. It's not good if you have the ability to upgrade and prolong the usefulness of your computers. So, not a fan of that personally.
How will we make money?
How will we make money? But if you have to force the upgrade?
Is it possible to unsolder the pieces?
Technically, yes.
It's hard.
But it's but it's going to be hard to redo it. I mean, you run the risk of damaging the board entirely. So UDIM is an unregistered. So it's an unbuffered or unregistered DIM. And Yeah. I don't know the immediate answer on that one, Kaylee. I'm just doing a quick check. It's basically, we use the unbuffered DIM is basically, it says like it's similar to the DIM. It just doesn't have to go through the registry or the memory controller for servers. So I guess it's distinguishing it for servers. That's what it appears like.
Is that anything we'll need to know about? Because I just realized that my PC is UDIM, and I'd never heard of that before, and I didn't really recognize it from the readings.
It's just distinguishing between buffered and unbuffered. No, you should not need to know that for the exam. So. All right. Oh, time to climb. Oh, you guys love this stuff. We're gonna get more penguins today. So before installing it, we power down the system, unplug the computer, and then hold on the power for 3 to 5 seconds to dispel the residual electricity within the capacitors. After that, we would be able to remove the side panel or access panel on the PC and gain access to the RAM modules. From there, we can remove old modules if we're replacing it or add new ones if we're just adding to. Obviously, when we are installing, use ESD bracelets so that we don't unintentionally destroy any other components in the system, including the brand new fancy upgraded RAM we just purchased. One quick thing you might want to do before you try installing it is take the RAM module and lay it down at an angle right next to the memory slot so you can make sure that the notch lines up properly. If it does not line up, you probably have the wrong type of RAM. So make sure it lines up, just lay it down kind of next to it and just check where the notch goes. All's good, stand it straight up, push it down with your thumbs, and you kind of put a little bit of force down on it, straight down, until you see those clips snap into place. Those clips will lock it in and hold it where it needs to be.
I have a question.
Yes.
So when it comes down to physically figuring out like if I have the right one, how do you go about doing it before you purchase it?
Well, first you would use the documentation. This is typically like a final check. So typically you would look and see you have DDR3, SODIMM, and like that's what you're going to need to purchase. And then based on the capacities and speeds, what your computer can handle or your operating system can handle, then you would order that. If you are using dual channel and you already have one installed, you want to make sure that you match it exactly so that when you install the new one, they operate correctly.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense. But as far as like being able to physically check, no, you're not going to be able to do that if you're like ordering it from like, online order, like PC part picker or something like that. So no, you just got to make sure you're paying attention to the generation. And then right before you install it, just double check it and make sure there's a notch in the right place. So, questions so far? All right. So here's just kind of a physical, like a pictorial display of what we were just talking about. So you see the module in, the person's using their thumbs to press straight down. And then the moment the module is in far enough, these little locking clips or tabs on either side will snap up into place like the one behind it. You can see the tabs kind of pushed in. And then when we're taking the module out, it's just in reverse. We press down those tabs and it will eject the module up enough to where we can grab it by the edges with our fingers and pull it out without damaging the unit. All right. Once we've installed it, we want to make sure, verify it in the BIOS, make sure the computer can see it, and it's verifying. SPD is doing what it's supposed to do, telling the RAM or telling the computer, here's what I am, here's what I'm capable of. If it doesn't snap easily into the slot, like only one side goes in, it's likely that the talking is hard, the notch does not line up, and you have an improper generation. So that may be one of them. Make sure the documentation of the system, if it's missing or not available because it's an older PC, it's a good idea to consult with your coworker Google, because they likely have the inside track on where you can go and get the documentation for the motherboard. So as long as you know what it is, which you can find out in your system info, you can go get the documentation online and figure out what kind you need. If you've installed it, you turn it back on, and then you go to your BIOS and you look and it's not seeing anything. It's possible that the RAM module is not installed correctly, or, big or, maybe that bank is disabled, because you can do that in the BIOS. You can disable certain banks if you're not using them. So you might need to turn it on and then be able to see what RAM module there is. Or if it's not installed properly, like you might get it like 90% there, but one tab doesn't lock in. So it may not recognize that the RAM is there. And one of the big indicators that it's not installed correctly is you get the fun post error. Does anybody remember how do we know we got a post error?
Your beepings.
Your beepings. Awesome. What does post stand for?
Power on self-test.
Self-test.
Power on self-test. Series of checks your computer runs when you first turn it on. And one of the main things it checks, RAM. Make sure you have some, make sure it's perfectly installed. If you're gonna get a post error, it's typically when you're installing RAM. It's one of the most common ones, which is why I say if you get a post error and you were just working inside the computer, it's likely whatever it is you were working on. Probably didn't have it plugged in correctly or snapped in or seated properly. So open it back up, seat the RAM again, and generally you get past there at that point. Right. So other warning signs that we may get. BSOD error or blue screen of death. Anybody here ever got that one? Anybody here ever got that one more than 100 times? Yep. Now, blue screen of death is really nice because it gives you an error code. That error code will tell you what the error is and where your problems are. So please pay attention to that as it's loading if you're getting one of those. System perks. I swear I caffeinated over lunch. The system works fine when first started, but starts to slow down over time. As you open things up, it starts running slower and slower and slower and slower. This is a system that you might not have installed it properly, or that you don't have enough RAM to, if you have not installed new RAM, that you probably need some more. Freezing or hesitating, system moving slowly. This could also be a warning sign of a RAM issue. It also can be a warning sign of a virus, because viruses are notorious. Their main design is to use up resources as much as possible, because that helps them spread and move. And then we already talked about the post error again, where you would need to go in, reseat the RAM, make sure those clips snap in properly. Like if one's all the way in and one's like almost all the way in, that may not be enough. You gotta make sure they're both seated pretty proper, pretty good. All right. So we just talked about a lot of this. Reboot your system. If it's slowly adding up over time, see if you can clear the RAM memory and see if that clears up your problem. You can enter the BIOS to set post to disable abbreviated start. And what that will do is it'll run a full memory check, see if there's any other memory issues. Another thing you can do if you really want to is check that memory on another system. You can check for overheating. So if it starts to overheat, dust and debris may be the issue in your system, especially if you have pets. That's really a big thing. Like if you have a tower, don't keep it on the floor. Even if you lift it up 6 inches, it aids it in its ability to breathe. And cats are the worst at this because they like warm places and like den-like places. So they'll crawl behind your computer and just kind of hang out there. And as they are animals that shed, hair goes in, doesn't always come out. I kid you not, when I was working on one computer, I opened it up and it looked like a pillow inside because there was so much pet hair in there that it was just packed in. System couldn't breathe. It was suffocating. So you may have to open it up, blow out dust and debris, remove any dust and debris, clean out your intakes on your fans to make sure that you have clean airflow. All the system will work much better. If all that stuff is clogged up, it can't breathe, it suffocates, and eventually you can damage components with heat, which is part of why we say don't put laptops on your lap. Don't put them on a pillow. Don't put them on a bed. Over time, they get damaged. Another issue, if you have system crashing, test your power supply. They have a PSU tester you can use. If you want practice with it, there's a lab for that. You get to use a PSU tester. Not all places will have that. Sometimes swapping out the power supply will tell you. You can also use a multimeter, which we showed you last week, to determine whether or not the voltage you're getting out is what it's supposed to be. Can anybody tell me the 5 voltages you would expect to see coming out of a power supply? Give me one at a time. Each person give me one.
3.3 volt.
3.3, positive, negative.
Positive, negative.
Positive 3.3.
3.3.
Okay.
Positive, negative 5.5.
Positive and negative 12.
Here we go. Positive, negative 12, positive, negative 5, positive 3.3.
Was
There
that
you go.
5 also negative 2?
Yes, positive and negative 5, positive and negative 12, and
Oh.
and positive 3.3. So 5 different types of voltages you would see coming out of the power supply in your computer. Go. Here's all the fun steps that we just talked about. Go ahead and feel free to take a screenshot of this just to have it all kind of in one place. But we've done these steps a couple days now. So give you a few seconds to take a screenshot.
Kelly, so we can't access the Nearpod slides outside of class, right?
Why can't you?
Oh, okay. I just assumed that because you chose to take screenshots.
Well, I say take screenshots because that way you don't have to go digging through 36 slides to find the one you need.
Right, right.
But yeah, we do have student pay slides that we drop in Slack every day as well.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
And an easier way, well, not an easier way. In the study group, we have like an entire resource section filled with slides. So if you ever need them, you can always go there too.
All right, thanks, Brandon.
Shout out to the Discord. All right. Go. And hopefully we've all gotten that. Study group link is in Slack. It is one of the pinned posts on the class channel. So up at the top, find the safety pin. Boom. All right. And just because he hails from my hometown, we can listen to Professor Messer explain basically what we were just talking about, give you kind of an abbreviated summary of what we were just listening to. Please give me a thumbs up if you got volume.
If you're looking at the specifications of your computer and you notice a section that describes memory, or somebody asks you how much memory is inside of your computer, they're referring to the amount of random access memory, or RAM. We're not describing the size of an SSD or the capacity of a hard drive. We're referring to the components inside of your computer where all of the transactions are taking place. When you're using the programs and the data on your computer, they're moved off of your SSD or your hard drive and they're put into RAM so that you can perform calculations on that information and then store that information back on the SSD or the hard drive when you're finished. Your desktop computer or your laptop will have slots where you can install the random access memory modules. The different motherboards may have different types of slots, but it makes it very easy to add, remove, or upgrade the memory that's in your system. The process of moving information in and out of memory is happening all the time inside of your computer, so the faster memory you have, the faster the overall performance will be of your computer. Every motherboard will be a bit different on how fast these transfers can occur in and out of memory. So check the documentation of your computer to see exactly how fast you can expect your memory to run. The type of physical package that installs into those slots on your motherboard is a DIMM. This is a dual inline memory module. It's called a dual inline memory module because this memory module has a series of contacts on one side of this module. It has another set of contacts on the other side of the module, and those two contacts are different on each side of that memory module. These dual inline memory modules have a 64-bit data width, so we're able to transfer data from these memory modules in chunks of 64 bits at a time. The memory that's inside of a laptop is probably a smaller version of the DIMM. This is the small outline dual inline memory module, and it's about half the width of a standard DIMM that you would find in a desktop computer. You can find the DIMMs and the SODIMMs available in DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4 flavors of SD-RAM. We'll explain what all of those are later on in this video. If you're using a SODIMM, it's probably inside of a laptop or a mobile device because of the size. You're able to fit a lot more information into a smaller area, which is important for those mobile devices. Here's a good size comparison of these two. The DIMM is the larger memory module that you would find in a desktop computer, and the SODIMM you can see is about half the size, and you would find that in laptops and other mobile devices.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of our technical session. Now we should be able to define system memory and describe the different technologies like volatile, non-volatile, registered, buffered, parity, error correcting code. Should be able to articulate the process, including key questions to answer when upgrading the memory. Will it fit? What generation? How much? Determine how to select it, summarizing the process of installing it, identify common issues and ways we can mitigate those problems. Thank you for listening. And that